My dear sisters, imagine a heart that bends before Allah with no words left, just faith. A heart that has cried, waited and hoped, yet still rises to pray. That kind of strength is not weakness, it is beauty hidden in surrender. When a woman stands before her Lord, even the silence between her du'as carries meaning. Each moment she spends in prayer reshapes her thoughts, soften, her wounds begin to heal, and her spirit starts to glow. It's not about getting everything she asks for, it's about becoming everything Allah knows she can be. Her prayer builds light where darkness once lived, and slowly peace replaces the ache. Because when she turns to Him, she isn't just speaking, she's returning home. Every word, every tear, every breath in sujood is seen by the one who never forgets His servant. And when He finally answers, it's not with sound, but with calm, the kind that makes her soul smile long before her lips do. When a heart finally bows before its Creator, something profound happens. The soul begins to rise. The moment her knees touch the ground, the weight of her world starts to lift. What once felt impossible begins to feel bearable. Every sujood becomes more than a movement. It becomes a silent surrender, a deep conversation between weakness and divine strength. She doesn't speak much, she doesn't need to. Allah already knows the story behind every tear. In that quiet space, she feels the heaviness of life slowly melt away. All that she couldn't fix, she places before Him. All that she couldn't carry, she lets go of. Her forehead touches the earth, but her heart ascends toward peace. The ground beneath her becomes a witness to her trust that she has nowhere else to fall but into Allah's mercy. When she kneels, she remembers that this position, the lowest physically, is the highest spiritually. It is where pride dies and peace is born. It's where the heart finally admits, I need you, Ya Allah. And that single realization opens doors no strength could ever open. In sujood, she rediscovers who she is, not weak, but chosen. Every tear that falls during prayer washes away a layer of pain. Each breath she takes while whispering His name brings clarity to her confusion. Her words are few, but her emotions speak volumes. She doesn't ask for a perfect life. She asks for the strength to walk through the imperfect one with grace. That is the beauty of her surrender. The world may think she is kneeling in defeat, but heaven sees her rising in power. Her sujood is not escape, it's transformation. It's the moment she stops holding on to outcomes and starts holding on to the one who writes them. When her knees touch the ground, her soul remembers that this is the safest place it could ever be. Prayer becomes her language when words fail. In that posture of humility, she learns that victory doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like tears mixed with trust. The earth beneath her feels her pain, but the skies above her record her faith. And Allah never overlooks the one who comes to Him sincerely. In the stillness of sujood, her heart whispers what her lips cannot form. The chaos of life fades, replaced by a deep, quiet peace. Her problems may still exist, but her perspective changes. She no longer begs for them to disappear. She asks for them to make her stronger. That shift is where true healing begins. When she bows down, she lets go of everything that burdens her, the opinions of people, the disappointments of the past, the fears of tomorrow. Each breath she exhales carries away another piece of pain. Each heartbeat echoes a silent truth. Asterisk, Allah is enough. Asterisk, that certainty becomes her comfort. The more she prays, the more her heart softens. Every sajda becomes a step closer to peace. What once made her cry now makes her grateful because she realizes it brought her closer to Him. Her pain once felt like punishment, but now she sees it was a path, a gentle push back to her Creator. Sujood teaches her that real strength isn't found in resistance, but in surrender. The power of kneeling is not in weakness, but in trust. The one who can fall before Allah rises above everything else. Her spirit learns to soar, not because life got easier, but because her faith grew deeper. When she kneels, the noise of the world disappears. The constant comparisons, the endless expectations all fade away. It's just her and Allah. In that moment, she realizes she was never truly alone. Every prayer she thought went unanswered was already being written into her story in a way she couldn't yet see. The ground where her forehead rests becomes sacred. It's soaked in her struggles, her hopes, her dreams, and her surrender. Angels witness those moments not because they're dramatic, but because they're pure. The heart that humbles itself before Allah gains a dignity no crown can give. Her sujood reminds her that nothing in this world is permanent, not pain, not failure, not disappointment. The only constant is Allah's mercy. That realization frees her. What once controlled her emotions now strengthens her faith. She rises from prayer lighter, calmer, more at peace. When she prays, she's not asking to escape life, she's asking to live it with purpose. Every sajda becomes a statement, asterisk, no matter what happens, I belong to you, asterisk, and Allah in His infinite love answers her in ways that silence her fears. Sometimes with blessings, sometimes with lessons, but always with mercy. Each time she kneels, her soul is rebuilt. She may enter prayer broken, but she leaves whole. Her strength doesn't come from being unshaken. It comes from being real with the one who already knows. She stops pretending to be fine and starts trusting that Allah understands the pain she never voiced. In sujood, she remembers that her worth was never in the approval of people. It was always in her connection to Allah. The world may overlook her effort, but He never does. Even her smallest act of devotion carries eternal weight in His sight. Her quiet worship becomes her unseen power. Her spirit rises higher because she finally lets Allah take control. She doesn't rush the outcome anymore. She rests in the process. She knows that every unanswered dua still carries blessing and every delay still holds purpose. Her trust becomes deeper than her desire for answers. The prayer mat beneath her feels like home. It's where she brings every version of herself, tired, hopeful, uncertain, grateful, and finds acceptance each time. The sujood that begins in exhaustion ends in renewal. Allah doesn't just hear her, He transforms her through every whispered plea. Wa inna amama. She realizes that every time she falls into sujood, she's not falling down, she's falling into grace. Her knees on the ground become a reminder that the heart is safest when closest to its Lord. Her spirit, once heavy, begins to float again, not away from life, but toward light. And when she finally rises from prayer, the world looks the same, but she doesn't. Her heart carries a softness that can't be shaken, a strength that can't be explained. She smiles not because everything is solved, but because her soul knows peace. She has touched the earth, and in doing so, her spirit has reached the sky. Tears are not signs of weakness. They are the soul's way of watering faith. Each drop that falls in sincerity carries a message that words could never express. When the heart breaks, tears flow, but when those tears fall for Allah, they turn into seeds of mercy. From pain, patience grows. From loss, wisdom blooms. Nothing is ever wasted when it is given to Him. When she cried in the darkness thinking no one heard her, the heavens did. The angels recorded every tear, not as despair, but as devotion. Those tears were never meant to drown her, they were meant to cleanse her. Each one washed away layers of pride, fear and attachment until only surrender remained. In those moments, her heart learned what peace truly meant. Allah never lets a tear of faith fall in vain. The ones shed in prayer are the most precious. They plant hope where hopelessness once lived. Every tear that escapes the eye falls straight into His mercy. What began as grief transforms into growth. What began in darkness begins to shine. Tears are proof that the heart is still alive, still connected to its Lord. They show that faith is fighting within, refusing to give up even when the world feels cold. The believer's tears are not of defeat. They are of recognition, a reminder that even brokenness is a form of worship when given to Allah. Each tear has its purpose. Some soften the heart, some erase sin, some bring you closer to understanding why you were tested in the first place. When a believer cries sincerely, Allah replaces pain with patience and sorrow with strength. From tears, light is born, and that light never fades. Every tear that fell in secret became a prayer that traveled far beyond sight. Even before the lips could form words, the heart had already spoken. And Allah, the most gentle, responded in silence, not always by removing pain, but by filling it with purpose. That is how sorrow becomes sacred. Tears are the water that nurtures the seeds of faith. Without them, the heart would remain dry, unfeeling and distant. Through them, the believer learns humility, empathy and submission. Every tear is a lesson written in sincerity, and every lesson draws the soul nearer to Allah. When she wiped her tears after prayer, she didn't know that each one had already been accepted. Allah was turning her sadness into strength, her waiting into wisdom. The garden of peace she longed for was already growing quietly, unseen but certain. That is the miracle of faith. It flourishes in silence. Sometimes Allah allows tears not to break you but to build you. They remind you that even when no one understands, He does. They wash away the dust of distraction and bring you back to remembrance. A heart that has cried in front of Allah walks lighter because it knows that no pain is ever forgotten by Him. The tears of faith are not the same as the tears of despair. They don't destroy, they renew, they don't darken, they cleanse. Each one contains light, a reflection of divine mercy. What you thought was an end becomes a beginning. The one who cries sincerely before Allah rises with more peace than they ever imagined. When the world sees tears, it sees weakness. When Allah sees tears, He sees devotion. He honors the heart that feels deeply and still turns to Him. Every time you cried, you were not breaking, you were becoming softer, more human, more connected to the divine. Those tears were shaping your soul for something greater. Even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, cried in prayer not out of fear, but out of love and awe. His tears were reminders that closeness to Allah is felt most deeply through humility. Sallallahu an-nasa. When you cry for His sake, you follow the path of those who found beauty in surrender. The tears that fall at night become light in the morning. They don't vanish into the ground. They rise to the heavens, carrying your story with them. Each one bears witness that you chose faith over frustration. You chose to bow instead of break. That choice is what transforms grief into grace. Tears have a way of revealing truth. They strip away pretenses, leaving the soul honest and raw. In that vulnerability, faith becomes real. You stop pretending to be strong and start relying on the one who is. And in that moment, the heart finally understands what it means to trust completely. The believer's tears are not wasted even if no one sees them. Allah collects them as treasures, each one a mark of sincerity, each one a testament of faith. When the time is right, those tears will return as blessings, opportunities and peace. Nothing poured out for His sake ever disappears. Every tear is a step toward light. Even when you can't see it, Allah is nurturing growth beneath the surface. One day, you'll look back and realize that what you thought was breaking you was actually building you. The tears you shed were watering a future filled with calm. Some of the most powerful prayers are prayed through tears. They require no eloquence, no long words, only honesty. And honesty opens doors that effort alone cannot. When a heart cries with sincerity, it becomes a magnet for mercy. Allah loves the broken hearts that still call on Him. When pain pushes tears from your eyes, don't rush to stop them. Let them fall and let them remind you that you still believe, you still care, you still trust. Because faith doesn't always shout sometimes. It whispers through trembling breaths and tearful prayers. Every tear that fell out of love for Allah carried light that guided, healed and purified. Each one was a silent testimony that faith is alive within. They may have begun in sorrow, but they ended in surrender. And from that surrender, her soul found peace. So when the eyes weep and the heart trembles, remember, no tear shed in remembrance of Allah is ever lost. Each one waters the soil of your destiny. And from that soil, light grows brighter, stronger and eternal. Because every tear shed in faith is not a sign of weakness, it's the birth of strength that only Allah can give. Between the du'as you make and the answers you wait for lies a silence that tests your soul. It's in that stillness that faith is refined. The believer often wonders if Allah is listening, not realizing that the waiting itself is an answer. The pause is not punishment, it's preparation. While the tongue grows quiet, the heart learns to whisper trust. The space between du'as is sacred. It is where patience blooms and gratitude matures. When you no longer rush Allah's timing, you begin to feel His wisdom in the pause. Every heartbeat in that silence is recorded. Every sigh of longing is noticed. The one who waits with faith never truly waits alone. Sometimes the stillness feels endless. You pray, you cry, and life seems unchanged. Yet in the unseen, mercy is moving. Angels are carrying your name, your hopes, your words to the one who never delays without reason. What you think is silence is actually Allah arranging what you cannot yet see. The quiet between du'as is not emptiness, it's fullness disguised as calm. It's the moment when the heart must decide, will you lose faith or deepen it? Allah withholds only to give more meaningfully. The believer's challenge is not to fill the silence with fear, but with remembrance. That stillness teaches humility. It reminds the soul that answers are not earned by impatience but by trust. When you stop demanding and start believing, the waiting becomes lighter. You begin to realize that every delay is a doorway, every pause a protection. Allah knows when your heart is ready for what your lips have asked for. In the stillness, faith finds its voice. You begin to speak less and feel more. You start to see how mercy hides in places you never thought to look. The unanswered dua begins to purify you. The heart that was restless becomes calm, not because it got what it wanted, but because it learned who it truly needed. When you raise your hands in prayer and nothing changes, know that something still shifts inside you. That inner transformation is mercy. The silence between du'as is not wasted. It's where Allah strengthens your soul. What He is building within you matters more than what you're waiting to receive. Even in silence, Allah is speaking through the peace that replaces panic, through the calm that follows chaos. He's saying, be still, my servant, your moment will come. And when that moment arrives, you'll understand why the silence lasted as long as it did. Every second was mercy in disguise. Many hearts grow impatient when du'as aren't answered quickly, forgetting that even silence can be a blessing. When Allah delays, He shields. When He pauses, He perfects. And when He finally gives, it arrives with barakah that no rushed outcome could ever hold. The stillness between du'as teaches you to see beyond outcomes. You start to value the process of turning to Him, not just the result. That's when your worship matures, when your dua is no longer about receiving, but about remaining in connection. That stillness becomes a sanctuary. Silence humbles the heart that thought it had control. It reminds you that your timeline isn't divine. The believer who can sit in that pause with gratitude grows spiritually stronger than the one who rushes for resolution. Stillness becomes an act of surrender, the highest form of worship. In those quiet moments, angels write down every time you said Ya Allah and waited faithfully. The unseen realm witnesses your resilience. Even your unspoken hope is heard, for nothing escapes His mercy. The stillness between du'as is where trust is tested and where love for Allah deepens. When you think heaven is silent, remember that Allah's delay is often His gentlest form of care. He gives you time to grow into the blessing you asked for. Sometimes He even protects you from receiving what would have harmed your soul. Mercy often looks like stillness before it looks like relief. That pause between asking and receiving is not an empty gap, it's divine attention at work. Allah is organizing, adjusting and aligning your destiny in ways your limited sight cannot grasp. The believer learns to rest in that truth and let patience become worship. The stillness also teaches gratitude for what you already have. As you wait for one prayer to be answered, Allah reminds you of the countless others He has already fulfilled. In the silence, gratitude grows, and gratitude itself becomes a form of answered prayer. Even the prophets experienced silence after their du'as. They taught us that patience is not passive, it's active faith. The Prophet Ayyub's perseverance, the Prophet Yusuf's endurance, each waited years in silence, and Allah's mercy arrived when the story was ready, not when they demanded it. The stillness between du'as is not wasted time, it is sacred space. It's where faith matures, character strengthens, and hearts soften. The believer who learns to sit in it peacefully carries a calmness that cannot be shaken by uncertainty. When you finally receive what you've been praying for, you'll realize that the silence had its own beauty. It was teaching you trust, shaping your gratitude, and preparing your heart to value the blessing properly. Every delay was mercy wrapping your dua in wisdom. And when heaven finally responds, the heart that waited will understand Allah was never absent. He was closest in the quiet, guiding, guarding, and granting unseen gifts. The stillness was not an interruption, it was the chapter that made the answer more meaningful. So the next time your dua is met with silence, smile. That silence is not empty, it's alive with mercy. Allah is working in that quiet moment, writing a story of patience, faith, and peace. Between every dua and its answer lies the most beautiful conversation, one that only your heart and your Lord can truly understand. When words failed, her heart began to speak. It spoke in sighs, in pauses, in quiet moments between breaths. She didn't need eloquence for her Lord to understand. Her silence was louder than speech. The heart has a language that only Allah knows, a rhythm of hope and pain intertwined with trust. Even when she could not explain what she felt, Allah already knew. Each beat of her heart carried meaning beyond expression. When she sat in solitude, her chest heavy with unspoken worries, she wasn't alone. Allah was listening to every thought she couldn't form. He heard the cries buried deep, the questions hidden beneath strength, and the dreams she no longer mentioned. Nothing in her went unnoticed. There are moments when the believer feels unseen, unheard, misunderstood by the world, but Allah in His infinite compassion hears the whisper of a thought before it becomes a word. He knows the trembling of a soul trying to hold on, the ache of faith that refuses to die. That understanding is a mercy greater than any comfort from people. Her heart's conversation with Allah never required words. Each tear, each sigh, each breath during hardship became a verse of worship. The angels witness it silently, knowing that the most sincere prayers are not always spoken aloud. The connection between servant and creator is felt, not heard. Sometimes she would sit in the stillness of the night, unable to say anything, just letting her emotions rise and fall like waves. And in that moment, Allah was closer than ever, closer than her thoughts, closer than her grief. He was not waiting for her to speak, He was waiting for her to surrender. The language of the heart is raw and honest. It hides nothing, and that's why Allah loves it. When words fail, sincerity begins. When speech stops, understanding deepens. Her heart spoke a truth that her tongue never could asterisk. I need you, even when I don't know how to say it. Her silence was not emptiness, it was communication in its purest form. Allah knew the reasons for her tears, the stories behind her exhaustion, and the strength behind her patience. The world saw quietness, but He saw devotion, and that was enough. Every believer has a moment when they cannot explain what they feel, when pain has no name and gratitude has no end. Yet Allah understands both equally. He reads hearts like open books. No emotion escapes His notice. No struggle goes unrecognized. The heart that turns to Him never has to fear being misunderstood. When she was tired of explaining herself to others, she turned to the one who never misinterprets her. He doesn't need words to know sincerity, nor details to know pain. Even her confusion was clear to Him. That awareness filled her with peace, the peace that comes only from being known completely. The heart speaks through actions as much as emotions. Every time she forgave, every time she waited, every time she chose kindness over anger, Allah heard those unspoken prayers. They said, Asterisk, I trust you. Asterisk, even without being voiced. That is the beauty of faith. It speaks even in silence. When she thought she had no one to talk to, she forgot that Allah understands every language, even the one made of tears. Every drop that fell was a message. I am still holding on. And Allah, the most compassionate, responded not always with words, but with calmness that settled deep within her. Her heart's language was sacred, a private dialogue between weakness and divine strength. She didn't need to know the right dua, because sincerity is what gives dua its power. The believer's greatest eloquence is honesty, and Allah, who loves truth, always listens to it. When she sat in silence after prayer, she could feel something shift inside her. It wasn't relief from the world, but reassurance from her Lord. The quiet peace that followed was His way of saying, I heard you. That understanding changed everything. The world may expect expression, but Allah accepts emotion. He knows what lies beneath the words, what hides behind the smiles. He knows when faith trembles and when it holds firm. And to Him, every heartbeat that says asterisk, I believe, asterisk, is worth more than 1,000 words. Even when her dua was incomplete, it reached its destination. Her scattered thoughts, half-spoken words, and uncertain whispers all were gathered, purified, and presented before the throne of mercy. Allah never needs clarity to respond. He only needs sincerity. The believer's heart speaks the language of dependence, a language that says, I cannot, but you can. That truth alone is enough to open doors of mercy. When the heart admits its weakness, Allah reveals His strength. That exchange is where real connection lives. She learned that not every prayer is meant to be understood by people. Some are meant to be felt, lived, and known only by Allah. Those hidden conversations build her spirit more than any answered request. The unseen prayers are often the ones that shape her destiny. Her heart's language was beyond human translation, a mix of love, longing, and trust. Allah doesn't just hear such hearts, He responds with subtle signs, a sudden calm, a peaceful sleep, an unexpected ease. Those are His replies to words never spoken. What she once saw as silence became communication. What she thought was confusion became clarity. Allah had been listening all along, not to her words but to her heart. And when her heart spoke, heaven understood perfectly. When a believer's heart speaks and Allah listens, miracles unfold quietly. Peace replaces worry, hope replaces despair, and faith grows without explanation. Her heart didn't need the world to understand, because the one who created it always did. That night was different. She sat where she always did, hands raised, heart heavy, but something within her shifted. For so long, she had been asking, pleading for outcomes, for signs, for answers, and all she found was silence. Yet that silence began to feel softer, almost comforting. It wasn't emptiness, it was invitation, an invitation to let go. She realized that perhaps it was never about the answers, but about the journey her prayers had taken her on. Every unanswered dua had taught her something new: patience, humility, and faith that doesn't depend on results. The tears she shed were not wasted. They had been watering the seeds of trust all along. When she finally lowered her hands that night, she didn't do it out of defeat but peace. She whispered softly, Asterisk, Ya Allah, I leave it to you. Asterisk, that moment became her turning point, the place where striving gave way to surrender and anxiety turned into assurance. It wasn't that her problems disappeared overnight. They remained, but her heart no longer trembled before them. She began to understand that trusting Allah doesn't mean having all the answers. It means believing that He does. That realization was the beginning of her freedom. As she closed her eyes, she could feel a strange calm settle over her. For the first time, her dua wasn't a list of requests, but a declaration of trust. She said less but meant more. Her words carried weight because they came from a heart that finally knew, asterisk, what Allah chooses is better than what I desire. The night grew quiet, and with it, her soul began to heal. She didn't need to control the outcome anymore. Every delay, every detour, Every disappointment, all of it now looked like mercy disguised as waiting. She could finally rest, knowing that Allah's plan never forgets anyone who believes. Trust is not built in moments of comfort. It's built in nights like these when everything feels uncertain, yet the heart says, times, alhamdulillah, times anyway. That night, she stopped asking for signs and started trusting the silence. And that silence became her teacher. Her heart began to recall every time Allah had carried her through before. The things she once cried for had become memories of strength. The prayers that went unanswered had become stories of divine timing. It was then she realized Allah never said no, He said wait. Trust is not about pretending to be okay. It's about knowing that even when you are not, Allah is still guiding you. That night, her tears changed. They were no longer tears of desperation, but of relief. She didn't need to know how things would unfold. She only needed to know who was unfolding them. The believer learns to let go, not because she's tired of asking, but because she finally believes in the one she's asking. That kind of trust is rare, the kind that prays and then sleeps peacefully, knowing that Allah never forgets a heart that relies on Him. Her dua didn't stop that night, it evolved. Instead of saying, Ya Allah, fix this, she began to say, asterisk, Ya Allah, guide me through this, asterisk. Her faith became softer but stronger, quiet but unbreakable. She no longer demanded answers. She waited for them in gratitude. When dawn approached, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She understood that trust isn't built by getting what you want. It's built by losing what you thought you needed and realizing you're still standing because Allah held you up. That night, she found strength in surrender. She remembered the words of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said that Allah is with those who are patient. And she thought patience is not just waiting, it's waiting beautifully. Her waiting had turned into worship, and her trust had turned into tranquility. That night marked a quiet transformation. She no longer saw her trials as punishments, but as pathways. What she once feared now became fuel for faith. She no longer ran after clarity. She walked with conviction. Her trust became her prayer. The believer who stops asking out of frustration loses hope, but the one who stops asking because of trust gains peace. Her heart had found what it was searching for all along, not answers, but assurance. She had stopped fighting Allah's will and started flowing with it. In that silence, she discovered that trust is not the absence of struggle, it's the decision to lean into it with faith. The waves didn't calm immediately, but she learned to float, carried not by control, but by conviction. That was the night she finally understood what surrender really means. She stopped counting the days and started counting her blessings. She stopped searching for signs and started living by them. Allah's wisdom was no longer something she questioned, it became something she relied on. Her dua had changed shape from give me to make me ready. That night her heart bowed deeper than her body ever could. She didn't need to see the future to believe in it. The unseen became enough. Her trust in Allah became her light, guiding her through the darkness of uncertainty toward the peace of submission. Every trial that once made her question now made her grateful. Every delay that once hurt now reminded her that Allah's love is protective, not absent. Trust had replaced the need for constant answers. The same night that once held tears now held serenity. And when she finally laid her head to rest, her heart whispered a truth it had learned through every prayer and every silence, that real peace isn't found in getting what you want, it's found in wanting what Allah chooses. That night she stopped asking and her trust became her greatest dua. Long before the answer arrived, peace found its way to her heart. It didn't come with a message, a sign, or a miracle. It came quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. She still didn't know how her situation would unfold, but something inside her shifted. Her trust had become stronger than her fear, and that was the mercy of Allah. Peace is not the absence of struggle, it's the presence of certainty. She realized that even when her prayers weren't answered yet, Allah had already given her something far greater, the strength to wait beautifully. The heart that learns to trust before it receives becomes untouchable. That calmness was a divine gift. She had spent many nights asking, wondering and hoping. Then one day she simply felt content, not because everything changed, but because she stopped needing it to. That's what divine peace does. It settles the heart before it settles the matter. It reminds the believer that Allah's timing is mercy, not delay. When Allah loves someone, He doesn't always remove their pain immediately. He replaces their panic with peace. The storm might still rage around them, but inside there is stillness. That inner calm isn't denial, it's faith. It's the quiet voice that says, I know my Lord is working on something good. She could feel that something was different. Her worries used to consume her, but now they seemed smaller. The same problems that once broke her now only reminded her to pray. It wasn't that her challenges vanished, she just stopped facing them alone. Allah had wrapped her in peace, and that peace became her protection. Faith doesn't stop the storm, but it gives you shelter within it. She understood that Allah's first gift is always calmness, not clarity. The peace He sends before the answer prepares the heart to receive whatever comes next, whether it's what we asked for or what we didn't know we needed. Her heart once raced with questions, but now it rested in remembrance. She began to notice blessings in the very moments she once called burdens. The same silence that once scared her now comforted her. That is how Allah transforms, not by changing the situation first, but by changing the soul. The peace that filled her heart didn't arrive from her effort, it came from surrender. She didn't force it, she found it in the moment. She said, Ya Allah, I leave it to you. That release became the doorway to serenity. The weight she carried began to lift, not because it disappeared, but because she stopped holding it alone. Allah's peace doesn't always come in big dramatic ways. Sometimes it arrives as a single breath after tears, a gentle ease in the chest, a moment of stillness where anxiety used to live. It's quiet, but it's powerful. It's the kind of peace that the world can't give and the world can't take away. Her life didn't become perfect, her perspective did. She stopped asking, why me? And started saying, guide me. That simple shift changed everything. Her heart became light because it was now anchored in something eternal. She was no longer waiting for peace, she was living in it. Allah sends peace not after the test, but during it. It's His way of saying, I am with you even now. That assurance fills the heart with courage that no hardship can shake. She began to walk differently, speak differently, and pray differently because she knew she was never alone. What used to break her now reminded her of her bond with her Creator. She realized that even unanswered prayers were signs of divine attention. The delay wasn't neglect, it was nurturing. Every moment she remained patient was an act of worship, and every breath in that patience was rewarded. The peace Allah gives is unlike any comfort from people. It doesn't depend on circumstances or outcomes. It's rooted in knowing that His wisdom never fails. Even if everything else seems uncertain, that truth is enough to keep the believer steady. Her heart had found its anchor. When the heart surrenders to Allah, the world loses its power to disturb it. She still faced difficulties, but they no longer defined her. Her peace became her armor. People wondered how she stayed so calm. But her secret was simple. She had handed her story to the author of all stories. Sometimes Allah answers a dua not with a change in life, but with a change in heart. That is the higher mercy. He doesn't always give what you ask for. He gives what your soul needs to stay close to Him. The peace that enters the heart in those moments is a hidden miracle. She learned that when peace comes before the answer, it means the heart is already being healed. Allah knows that true comfort doesn't come from getting what we want, but from trusting the one who knows best. That's why He calms your soul before He changes your situation. Even when she couldn't see the way forward, she knew the one guiding her steps. That realization became her calm. Her heart, once restless, now moved with quiet assurance. She didn't need to understand everything. It was enough to know that Allah never forgets those who call on Him sincerely. The peace that filled her wasn't fragile. It was faith-shaped. It could withstand disappointment, delay, even loss, because it wasn't built on hope for outcomes. It was built on trust in Allah's plan. She finally understood what it means to rest in His decree. When the answer finally came, she smiled not because she got what she asked for, but because she realized she had already received something better, peace. That was the real blessing, the one that made her heart strong enough to face whatever came next. So she continues to pray, but now with calmness instead of fear, with surrender instead of struggle. She knows that Allah's mercy doesn't begin with the answer, it begins with peace. And when He wraps a believer in that peace, no storm, no delay, and no disappointment can ever take it away. Fear had always whispered loudly in her mind about the future, about loss, about what might go wrong. But one day, something within her changed. She grew tired of listening to those voices. She realized that every time fear spoke, faith was quietly waiting to be heard. And so she began to listen to that whisper of belief that reminded her, Allah is enough. Faith doesn't always roar. Sometimes it begins as a fragile thought, a soft reminder that there's more to life than what you can see. Her heart began to hold on to that. Little by little, when she felt anxious, she reminded herself that her story was written by the one who makes no mistakes. Slowly, faith started to drown out fear. She had learned that fear thrives in the absence of trust. The more she leaned on Allah, the quieter her fears became. They didn't disappear overnight, but they lost their power. The same worries that once controlled her began to fade into background noise. Her heart was now tuned to the frequency of faith. Each time she faced something uncertain, she chose remembrance over reaction. Her dhikr became her shield, her tasbih, her therapy. Fear would rise, but her heart would reply, Hasbi Allah, Allah is sufficient for me. And every time she said it, peace took a little more space inside her. Faith had taught her that the unknown is not to be feared but trusted. Allah is already present in every moment she's afraid of. He's ahead of her, guiding her even in the darkness. That realization made her brave, not because she stopped feeling fear, but because she learned that courage is walking forward with faith anyway. When she looked back on her life, she saw a pattern. Every time she thought she was falling apart, Allah was actually putting her together. The hardest moments became proof of His presence. Fear began to lose credibility because it had been wrong so many times before. Faith had been right all along. The world teaches people to be strong, but she learned that real strength is surrender. It's not in pretending you're fearless, but in trusting Allah while you're trembling. Faith doesn't remove the storm, it reminds you who controls it. That's why her faith became louder. It spoke truth over emotion. She began to see fear differently. It wasn't an enemy anymore, it was a test, a reminder of where her heart stood. When fear came knocking, she opened the door with dua. When doubt crept in, she answered with dhikr. Allah had given her the tools. All she needed was to use them with conviction. Her faith gave her new eyes. Instead of seeing obstacles, she started seeing opportunities to rely on Allah more deeply. What once felt like a setback now felt like a setup for something greater. Fear may have shouted, what if it doesn't work? But faith replied, what if Allah brings something better? Every time she chose faith, peace followed. It didn't mean her life became easy, but it became meaningful. Even when fear tried to return, it couldn't stay for long. The light of conviction had filled every corner where anxiety used to live. Faith became her loudest thought. Her prayers changed tone. They were no longer filled with panic, but with presence. She didn't just ask for safety from hardship, she asked for strength within it. Fear says, you can't handle this. Faith says, Allah will handle it for you. And that difference made her unstoppable. She realized that the same heart that fears can also trust. It just depends on what you feed it. The more she remembered Allah, the more fearless she became. Fear can only survive in forgetfulness, and she refused to live unaware of His mercy again. Faith taught her that peace isn't found when life is perfect, but when the soul is aligned with Allah's will. She no longer begged for control, she prayed for contentment. The unknown no longer scared her because she knew the author of her destiny was never uncertain. When she walked through difficulty, she carried verses instead of worry. Asterisk, indeed, with hardship comes ease. Asterisk, those words became louder than every anxious thought. She began to see every fear as an opportunity to prove her trust, every delay as proof of divine timing. The people around her noticed the change. She smiled more, even when things were unclear. That smile wasn't denial, it was faith made visible. It said, asterisk, my heart knows something my eyes don't see, asterisk. And that kind of serenity can only come from believing that Allah never leaves. Her fears didn't vanish completely, they simply lost their throne. Faith had taken over the seat of her emotions. Whenever anxiety tried to return, she reminded herself that Allah has never failed her, not once. She carried that certainty like armor. The heart that once panicked now prayed. The soul that once feared the future now anticipated Allah's goodness. She had stopped expecting disaster and started expecting mercy. That was the sound of faith echoing louder than fear ever could. She understood that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's faith that outshines it. The same situation that once caused tears now brought gratitude because she could finally see Allah's hand in every part of her story. Her fear had been teaching her to trust. When the night felt heavy and uncertainty surrounded her, she no longer cried from worry, she cried from awe. The one who carried her through before was still carrying her now. Her faith wasn't loud because she spoke it, it was loud because she lived it. And as she walked forward, her fears no longer guided her steps, her faith did. She didn't need to see what was next, she only needed to know who was walking with her. That was enough. Her heart, once trembling, had found its rhythm again, a rhythm that whispered, Allah is with me. It had been a long journey of tears, patience, and silent prayers. Her smile did not appear overnight. It was built slowly, through every moment of surrender and trust. When it finally returned, it wasn't the same as before. It carried stories of struggle, faith, and divine healing. The angels who once recorded her pain now recorded her peace. Her smile was not born of ease but endurance. It was the reflection of a heart that had been tested and found content. She didn't smile because life became perfect. She smiled because she finally understood that Allah's plan was perfect. What once broke her now reminded her how far she had come through His mercy. When she smiled, heaven took notice, not because of the expression, but because of what it represented. Resilience. The angels who had seen her weep during long nights of dua now saw light in her eyes again. Her smile was not ordinary, it was worship in disguise, a silent thank you to her Lord for carrying her through. Every hardship she faced had been carving strength into her soul. Her smile was proof that faith doesn't erase pain but transforms it. The angels who had written down her patience now witnessed its fruit. That upward curve of joy was a statement. Asterisk, Allah never leaves a heart empty when it trusts Him fully. Asterisk, her smile came after seasons of silence. She had once thought her pain was endless, her hope too fragile. Yet Allah, in His wisdom, replaced her sorrow with peace long before she realized it. By the time she smiled, she wasn't the same person anymore. She was softer, wiser, and closer to Him. It wasn't a loud celebration, just a quiet moment of realization. She looked at herself and thought, asterisk, I survived what I once thought I couldn't. Asterisk, that gratitude became her smile. The angels who watched her pray through exhaustion saw it and knew her heart had healed, not by time, but by trust. When a believer smiles after hardship, it is not forgetfulness, it is faith. It's the heart saying, asterisk, Allah was right all along. Asterisk, her smile wasn't denial of pain, it was the acknowledgement of purpose. The angels recorded her joy the way they once recorded her tears, for both were signs of devotion. Her smile carried the fragrance of Sabr. It spoke of the nights she whispered asterisk, Ya Allah, make it easy asterisk, and the mornings she woke up still believing. She had learnt that patience isn't waiting for pain to end, it's finding meaning in it. And now her smile told that story without words. When she smiled, it wasn't for the world. It was between her and her Creator. The same Lord who saw her break had rebuilt her heart with gentleness. The angels who witnessed her sadness now witnessed her gratitude. She didn't need applause. Her contentment was already seen by the one who matters most. Her smile was quiet victory. It wasn't about conquering others, but about conquering herself, her doubts, her fears, her impatience. It was faith matured through experience. And as she smiled, she felt it, that unseen warmth, that peace that only comes when the heart finally lets go of control. Each smile that came after pain became an act of remembrance. She remembered how every delay had hidden wisdom, how every loss had carried growth. Her smile wasn't built from forgetfulness, it was built from understanding. The angels who had watched her struggle now saw the light of completion. The believer's smile after hardship carries weight in the unseen. It declares that mercy has triumphed, that despair has been silenced. Her smile became her sadaqah, a charity of hope to everyone who saw her. It reminded others that healing is possible when you walk with Allah. When she smiled again, it wasn't the same joy she once knew. It was deeper rooted in faith, not fleeting happiness. Her peace no longer depended on outcomes. It rested in her certainty that Allah never withholds except to give better. That realization illuminated her heart and softened her face. Her smile carried the echo of every dua she once cried. The angels remembered her pleas, her trembling voice in the night. Now they recorded her gratitude, not in words, but in the serenity that radiated from her. Her heart was at rest, and that rest was worship. The world may have forgotten her struggles, but the heavens did not. Her story was written in patience, and her smile was its final verse. It was proof that pain can end beautifully when handled with faith. Allah had seen her in her lowest moment now. He allowed her to rise in light. Her smile wasn't naive, it was knowing. It came from a heart that had faced storms and found shelter. She no longer feared the future because she had seen what Allah could do with brokenness. The angels who once wrote her sighs now wrote her gratitude, every breath filled with peace. Each smile became a reminder that nothing is ever truly lost when it's given to Allah. He had replaced what she lost with something far greater, calmness. Her soul no longer begged for what used to hurt. It simply said, asterisk, Alhamdulillah for everything. Asterisk. That phrase became the reason behind her peace. When she smiled, it wasn't just joy, it was testimony. It said that Allah's plan was worth the wait, that His silence was never neglect. Her heart had walked through shadows and found the light that only faith could reveal. That smile was the reflection of divine healing completed. The angels who had once surrounded her in sadness now surrounded her in serenity. Her story was no longer one of sorrow, but of strength. She had been tested and transformed. Her smile was not a return to who she was. It was the unveiling of who Allah always meant her to be. And so, when she finally smiled, it wasn't just her joy that filled the air. It was hope. Hope for every heart that still waits, still prays, still weeps in silence. The angels witnessed it and knew another servant had found peace in Allah. Her smile became light, and that light will never fade. Her journey was never about finding perfection, it was about finding peace. She had walked through storms that once made her doubt, cried prayers that never left her heart, and waited in silence that only Allah could understand. Yet through it all, her faith quietly grew roots. It was unseen but unshakable, and when her heart finally found calm, her smile became proof that Allah's mercy had always been near. That smile wasn't just the end of pain, it was the beginning of understanding. It was the moment she realized that every unanswered prayer, every tear and every delay was part of a plan more beautiful than she could imagine. Allah hadn't forgotten her. He had been building her. Every hardship had carved depth into her heart. Every test had planted faith within her soul. The angels who once recorded her patience now recorded her peace. They witnessed her hope rising like dawn, not loud, not rushed, but steady and pure. Because the one who learns to smile after breaking has truly understood Allah's promise that after every hardship comes ease. So when life feels heavy, remember her story, the story of the believer who smiled, not because everything went right, but because she trusted the one who can never do wrong. Keep praying, keep hoping, keep walking, even if it's slow. The same Lord who brought light to her face will one day bring light to yours. Your smile too will be witnessed by angels when your heart finds peace in the plan of Allah.